You know what's crazy? Two people can make the same amount of money for 10 years and end up in completely different financial realities. One person stays stressed forever. The other quietly builds wealth. Same economy, same city, same inflation, same opportunities. Different behavior, different priorities, different thinking. And this is where most people misunderstand money completely. They think millionaires became rich because they earned more. Sometimes, yes, but most of the time, wealth is not created by income first. It's created by financial behavior before the income even increases. Look, there are people making six figures who are completely broke. And there are people making average salaries with investment accounts, emergency savings, cash flow systems, and growing net worth. Here's what most people don't realize. Money amplifies habits. If someone is financially reckless with $1,000, they'll usually be reckless with $100,000. More money does not automatically create intelligence. It exposes patterns. My name is Jack, and I spend way too much time thinking about money psychology, wealth systems, and financial behavior. If you're someone who earns money but still feels financially stuck, subscribe and hit the like button, because this video might completely change how you look at money forever. And today, we're talking about millionaire mindset. Not fake luxury online, not rented cars, not rise and grind. Real financial thinking patterns that separate people who build wealth from people who constantly restart from zero.
Here's the first difference. Poor thinking focuses on appearance. Wealthy thinking focuses on ownership. That sounds simple, but the consequences are massive. Most people buy things to look successful. Millionaire thinking buys things that produce cash flow. One person buys an expensive car to impress strangers. Another buys assets that eventually pay for the car forever. Completely different psychology. One seeks validation. The other seeks leverage. And leverage changes everything. Because income from labor is limited by time, but assets continue working after the work is done. That's why wealthy people become obsessed with ownership. Ownership of businesses, ownership of investments, ownership of systems, ownership of cash flow. Look, the average person increases lifestyle every time income increases. Salary goes up 20%, spending goes up 30%. This is called lifestyle inflation, and it destroys financial progress silently. Millionaire thinking delays lifestyle upgrades. That's the key difference. Instead of immediately upgrading apartments, cars, phones, vacations, they redirect excess cash into assets first. Here's a real example. Two people receive a salary increase from $5,000 to $7,000 per month. Person one immediately upgrades car payments, apartment rent, restaurants, subscriptions, and shopping. Within 6 months, they feel broke again. Person two keeps living almost the same and invests the extra $2,000 monthly into index funds, averaging 10% annually. After 10 years, that difference becomes hundreds of thousands of dollars. Same income increase, different mindset, different future. And this is where psychology becomes dangerous. Humans naturally chase short-term dopamine. Buying feels rewarding immediately. Investing feels boring immediately. The brain struggles to value future rewards correctly. That's why most people stay trapped financially. Their financial decisions are emotional, not mathematical. Millionaire thinking trains delayed gratification. Not because rich people hate spending money, because they understand timing. A wealthy person would rather temporarily look average and permanently gain freedom later. Most people do the opposite. They temporarily look rich and permanently stay financially fragile. Here's another uncomfortable truth. Millionaire mindset is heavily connected to emotional control. Most financial problems are emotional problems, disguised as money problems. Overspending often comes from stress, insecurity, comparison, loneliness, boredom, or status anxiety. Companies understand this extremely well. The global advertising industry spends hundreds of billions annually manipulating emotional behavior. They don't sell products, they sell identity.
They sell status. They sell belonging. They sell the illusion that your life improves emotionally after buying something. And sometimes it does, briefly. But then adaptation happens. The excitement fades. The spending remains. Now you might be thinking, okay, Jack, so millionaires never spend money? No, completely wrong. Millionaires spend aggressively on things that either produce value, save time, improve health, increase productivity, or create opportunity. They just don't confuse consumption with wealth. Huge difference. A luxury watch is usually consumption. Buying equity in a business is ownership. One drains future cash flow. The other creates future cash flow.
Here's what most people don't realize. Wealthy people often optimize for freedom more than status. Freedom to choose projects, freedom to say no, freedom to leave toxic environments, freedom to survive emergencies, freedom to buy time back. That's why emergency funds matter so much. The average person sees savings as unused money. Wealthy thinking sees savings as defensive power. According to multiple financial surveys, a massive percentage of people cannot handle even a small, unexpected expense without debt. That creates permanent anxiety. Millionaire mindset values stability because stability creates better long-term decisions. And this is where investing changes the entire game. Most people save money. Wealthy people deploy money. Huge difference. Savings alone slowly lose value because inflation continuously reduces purchasing power. If inflation averages around 3% annually, idle cash silently becomes weaker every year. Millionaire thinking understands that money must move intelligently. Money sitting still is slowly shrinking. Money invested into productive assets has potential to grow. That's why wealthy people obsess over compound growth. Compound interest looks weak in the beginning and unbelievable later. This is why patience becomes a financial advantage. Look at this example. Someone investing $500 monthly with an average annual return around 10% could potentially reach over $1 million in several decades without becoming a celebrity, entrepreneur, or genius. Most people underestimate compounding because humans think linearly. Wealth compounds exponentially. The first years look boring. Then suddenly the curve becomes aggressive. This is where it gets really interesting. Millionaire mindset focuses less on immediate results and more on systems repeated consistently over time. Another massive difference is risk perception. Poor thinking often avoids productive risk, but accepts destructive risk constantly. People fear investing in diversified assets, but casually finance expensive depreciating cars with high-interest debt. They fear starting businesses, but comfortably remain dependent on single paychecks for decades. Wealthy thinking understands that avoiding all risk is impossible. The real goal is intelligent risk management, diversification, cash reserves, multiple income streams, insurance, skills, assets. These reduce fragility. And honestly, one of the biggest differences is long-term thinking. Average financial thinking asks, can I afford the monthly payment? Millionaire thinking asks, what is the total long-term cost? That changes everything. A financed lifestyle can quietly steal decades of investing power. Imagine someone spending $1,000 monthly on unnecessary luxury financing. Invested instead at historical market averages, that money could potentially become enormous over time. Most people never calculate opportunity cost. Millionaire thinking constantly does. Here's another psychological shift. Wealthy people often think in percentages, not emotions. If someone earns $5,000 monthly and spends $4,900, they are fragile, regardless of appearances. If another person earns $4,000 monthly and saves and invests 50% consistently, they are becoming financially stronger despite lower income. Wealth is not only about earnings, it's about retained capital and productive allocation. Now, let's talk about time, because this is where average thinking completely collapses. Most people sell time directly forever. Hour equals money. Stop working, income stops. Millionaire mindset becomes obsessed with separating income from direct labor. Businesses, investments, royalties, systems, digital products, equity, dividends, rental income, scalable systems.
Because time is limited. Even high salaries remain limited if income depends entirely on presence. Here's what most people don't realize. Millionaires are often boring financially. Internet culture makes wealth look flashy and chaotic. Real wealth creation is usually repetitive and systematic. Budgeting, investing monthly, reducing bad debt, increasing skills, managing risk, avoiding stupid financial decisions, staying consistent for years. That's the truth nobody wants because it's less exciting than fantasy. And look, millionaire mindset also protects attention aggressively. Attention drives financial behavior. Constant exposure to consumer culture increases unnecessary spending dramatically. Social comparison destroys rational decision making. People buy things emotionally because they see curated lifestyles online all day. Wealthy thinking filters noise. Not every trend matters. Not every luxury matters. Not every opinion matters. Focus matters more. Another important difference is education. Rich thinking continuously learns about taxes, investing, business, negotiation, cash flow, psychology, and economics. The average school system barely teaches personal finance. Most adults enter the real world understanding algebra better than debt interest. That's insane. A person can graduate without understanding credit utilization, compound growth, inflation, asset allocation, or retirement systems. Then companies profit from that ignorance for decades.
And this connects directly to debt. Millionaire mindset treats debt strategically, not emotionally. There is productive debt and destructive debt. Productive debt can potentially acquire appreciating or cash flow producing assets. Destructive debt funds consumption that immediately loses value. Most people mix these together completely. Credit card debt with high interest rates can destroy wealth aggressively because compounding works both ways. Compound growth builds wealth slowly. Compound interest against you destroys wealth silently. Now, you might think millionaire mindset means never enjoying life. Wrong again. The real point is intentional spending. Wealthy people often spend heavily on what genuinely matters to them while cutting ruthlessly on meaningless spending. They optimize happiness differently. Instead of random emotional purchases, they buy freedom, convenience, health, experiences, education, and time. And honestly, one of the biggest mindset shifts is understanding that financial independence is built before it becomes visible. Most people only respect visible wealth: cars, clothes, watches, houses. But invisible wealth matters more. Investments, equity, cash reserves, low debt, ownership. Those are harder to show online, but they create real security. Here's what most people don't realize. Millionaire mindset is less about becoming rich and more about becoming difficult to financially destroy. That's the real game. Building resilience, building systems, building optionality, building cash flow. Because once your financial foundation becomes strong enough, opportunities become easier to take. Stress decreases. Decisions improve. And this is why patience becomes almost unfair financially. Average people constantly restart. New trend, new strategy, new impulse. Wealthy thinking compounds consistency. Same investments, same systems, same habits, repeated for years. Humans underestimate what disciplined repetition does over decades. Look, nobody becomes wealthy accidentally for long. Lottery winners often lose everything because behavior didn't change. Professional athletes go broke despite millions because psychology matters more than temporary income. Wealth without systems disappears quickly. So if you want the real millionaire mindset, start here. Spend less than you earn consistently. Avoid destructive debt. Build emergency savings. Invest automatically. Focus on ownership over appearance. Think long term. Learn financial skills continuously. Control emotional spending. Protect your attention. Build systems instead of relying on motivation. Understand that money is a tool, not identity. Because the real difference between broke thinking and wealthy thinking
is simple. One mindset spends money to impress people today. The other builds systems to gain freedom tomorrow. And over enough years, that difference becomes enormous.